Serious, what have you never been able to forgive? When I was like 9, the Pokemon craze was in full swing. I had a decent collection of the trading cards. Nothing great, but to me, they were my prized possessions. I talked back to someone and that set my dad off. Went on a rant. Somehow ended up blaming Pokemon for it. Don't remember the conversation, really, but he took all the cards, said they were gone for good. Couple weeks later, he gives me a couple of them back, but only like 10 out of the over 100 I had. Wasn't until a couple of years ago that I realized why. The few I got back weren't official cards. Some from I think Burger King, some obvious fakes, etc. All the real cards were gone. It had nothing to do with him having a problem with Pokemon. He just wanted an excuse to take them and sell them. Only the worthless ones came back. As a daughter of a former drug addict who sold my stuff, I know how you feel. IDK, what's worse, your stuff being gone or the knowledge that it was taken to be sold? My mom. Growing up, my dad was an abusive alcoholic with a drug problem. My mom always did what she could to shield him from the consequences of his actions, including lying to the police. One time she told the police that 13-year-old me started a fight and assaulted my dad in order to keep him from going to jail. I got arrested and spent the night in juvenile detention. That was 25 years ago. I can't forgive her for that. My stepmom cheating on my dad. He's such a good guy and has done so much for her, including adopting her son from a previous marriage, and she freaking destroyed him. The exact same thing is happening for me right now. My stepdad carried on a relationship with another woman and then blamed my mom for it and said she has no right to be upset. Bastard adopted me and one of my sisters and has the audacity to behave this way. My auntie-in-law tried to steal all of the money when her sister died suddenly. She took the family to court. She tried to steal the money from all 4 of her kids and her husband while they struggled to make ends meet. She knew that. All the while she stayed with them and pretended to mourn the loss of her sister. Needless to say, the entire family got behind the kids and we hired an incredible lawyer that made sure that woman didn't get a cent. I'll never forgive that lady for trying to do that in her family's time of need. I have a lot of anger towards my mother-in-law. My father became very sick suddenly and I had to drop what I was doing to drive 6 hours and be with him. My wife and 4-year-old son were staying at her place for at least a night or 2. Wife and Mill get into an argument over something fairly small, but it escalated into Mill and her fiance screaming at my wife for many other things and nearly got physical. Mill stirred up some serious crap at a time when she needed to be supportive. She couldn't take care of my family when I needed her most. We have not spoken to her in nearly a year. Wife's grandparents have also chosen not to speak with my wife because of what's going on. I think about it every day. I've literally lost sleep over it. I just want to ask her why she thinks it was okay to treat my family the way she did. I recommend Are Just Normal if you need a place to vent. My father assaulted me when I was a toddler. Then he lied to me about it when I didn't remember, and pretended everything was fine until I confronted him once I was finally clued in when I hit my teens. Even when confronted, he insisted it was my mother's fault for leaving him, and never apologized. I don't think it even occurred to him that there was a need to apologize. I could maybe forgive the abuse, but refusing to accept blame for things that are your fault. Forgiving that puts me at risk of a leech. Cut off contact 12 years ago. Never looked back. My sperm donor would put my brother's face in his dirty nappies and beat the snot out of us. Won't bore you with the details, but when he dies I'll make sure to spit on his grave after not attending the funeral. My dad got really drunk at my baby son's wake and said some incredibly disrespectful things and wouldn't stop. In the middle of the wake, in front of everyone, I burst out crying and pleaded with him to stop. I said to him that today of all days, one of the worst days in my entire life, I needed him to be supportive and just be quiet. He didn't. He continued drinking, then decided to drive home drunk. I was so close to calling the police on him because I had it in my head that I was going to lose my parents or he would kill someone on the road. I didn't, but I wish I did. To top it off, when I thought the horrible day was over, he started calling me when I got home and said even more disrespectful stuff to me and stuff about my partner, joking about things that I didn't appreciate, like asking if my partner was sat in the corner having a wank frick off. Dad. I ended up sending a bunch of texts that my mum ended up replying to, saying how disrespectful he was being and how upset he was making me. She was defending his behavior and calling me sensitive, saying that's how he dealt with grief, by picking on his own daughter at her son's funeral and saying completely inappropriate things apparently, telling me I should know what my dad's like and I should just move on, that he'd do anything for me. I told her that if he couldn't put aside his own need to be the center of attention for one day, even after I pleaded with him in tears to stop, then I didn't want to speak to him. I stopped talking to him for a couple of months. My son died 5 months ago. He kept going around telling everyone that I was being really sensitive and he didn't know what I was so upset about. Everyone at the wake agreed with me about how crap he was being. My mum tried to guilt trip me by saying that her dad's dead and I should just forgive and forget because she'd give anything to talk to her dad again. My dad's never made an apology because he doesn't believe he did anything wrong. Now we barely speak and I know I'll never be able to forgive him. He made one of the worst days of my life even more terrible by being a C. I have a lot. I shouldn't, but I do. Here's one. When I was in early elementary school I took up origami as a hobby. Great way of killing time, especially when I was bored in class, and I got really good at making some more complicated stuff. I usually just used junk notebook paper. Only rarely did I ever get my hands on real origami paper, and since most of my stuff was made with crap paper, I usually just threw it out later that day. I'd keep some really nice pieces made from the good paper in my room, but nothing more. Did this for a couple years. One day my dad comes home angry about something. Don't remember why, but he decided to come in my room to take some of it out on me. He lays into me, saying how much I waste time making all this trash, how origami isn't productive, how I'm embarrassing him, how I'm cluttering up the place and I should throw it all out. Storms out after. Being only 9 and an obedient kid, I sadly take all my nice pieces and things and throw them away later that day. He sees me doing this and I sorta expect a sort of no I didn't mean it, I was just angry apology, but nope. He watched silently on as I got rid of it all. People noticed that I had suddenly stopped doing origami and would ask why, and not believe me when I said my dad told me to stop. Never did origami again. Never got an apology for getting yelled at for a harmless hobby. I still resent this. For the record, everyone who is saying I should pick it up again, get back at him, or confront him, this happened over 13 years ago. I never went back to doing it because I got other hobbies and it really just left a sour feeling anytime I thought about it. He probably doesn't even remember and wouldn't give a crap if I did or not. The person who raped and abused me when I was a child. It went on every other day for 4 years. He was a kid who lived next door to us. He was about 10ish years older than me and he would come over and play video games with my older brothers. Afterwards he would come to my bedroom so we can play our own games. Also my parents for refusing to believe me and trying to defend him. You know those allegations ruin people's lives, right? He was such a nice young man, why are you trying to hurt him like this? I can't believe you're so desperate for attention that you're making up such disgusting stories. He was a teenager. He was probably just curious. It wasn't that bad. And my personal favorites, are you sure it wasn't just a bad dream and you are mentally ill and are having false memories? He was a teenager. He was probably just curious. It wasn't that bad. I've heard this too many times from my parents. And I am sorry. I was able to move past my abuse eventually, and I hope you will too. My brother tried to stab me with a screwdriver. He ended up hitting the wall with it. I've forgiven him for that. In this moment though, I was terrified, so I called the police. They arrested him and he was served with an AVO. He won't forgive me for calling the police and has written me off telling people he doesn't have a sister. Well, I don't know if it helps you, but he is an idiot. My biological father used to get drunk and beat the crap out of me, or verbally abuse me. He once came in my room pee drunk to tell me I was an accident and how much he regretted having me. One of my earliest memories with him was him forcing me to drink a whole beer when I couldn't have been more than 3. I finally stopped talking to him when I was in 5th grade. He got super loaded and started hitting me as hard as he could through the shower curtain. He gave me a bloody nose and I think I fell in the tub. He later changed, got super religious, was pretty driven and successful, remarried and had 2 more kids. He died of cancer before his other kids finished high school. We had a relationship before he died. He met my son for the first time when he was 5. I don't remember him ever saying sorry. He may have, but I never really got over it. Never really forgave him and always feared for his other kids, even though I think he had changed. My sister traded her dress for my grandma's funeral for cigarettes and then didn't show up. My grandparents raised her when her mom and dad didn't want anything to do with her. My family was under an appealing process that involved court. To avoid being deported, we paid really good lawyers from a good firm. Paid around $10K. The lawyer that was supposed to do our case gave it to one of his lawyers under him that was not capable of revising our case better and actually help. We lost the case and my parents had to leave the country. On the judge report he mentioned a lot of stuff that he wanted to see or get proof of that lawyer said he wouldn't want, so we didn't do present. For example, the judge said he would have wanted me to talk, but the lawyer told us that he would not consider what I say because they are my parent. Bulls. You may want to report that to your state's bar organization. That could be malpractice. I had my asthma denied for a few years. It got diagnosed when I was 7-8, but my stepmom took me aside and told me that you don't really have asthma. Stop taking medicine you don't need, and I did. Took another few years of it being untreated for a teacher to notice and me to get it refilled. It's a lot worse than it was. To the point where cold last a few weeks and walking by people smoking could send me to the hospital. It used to be mild. Sorry if this is a bit ranty. My parents never got my asthma treated even though they did for my younger brother. I remember begging them to take me to the allergy doctor like they did for my brother. I finally went myself when I was 22 and yup, I have asthma and numerous allergies and have been taking meds ever since. Getting detentions and subsequent groundings after being involved in fights at school growing up. Excuse me, students, teachers, the people fighting, and even you yourself, Princey not my pal, said I didn't deserve the punishment. But frick me, I guess, because zero tolerance means you don't have to make any hard decisions. I'm still fricking salty. If your school has a zero tolerance policy and someone hits you, the punishment is the same for everyone. Might as well hit back. They managed to incentivize more violence. My brother's friend agreed to look after my goldfish while we went away on holiday for 2 weeks and either intentionally killed them or neglected them until they died. I could have forgiven it if he'd been apologetic or tried to make it right, but he didn't. Instead, he treated it as if it were all a hilarious joke and like I was the one in the wrong for being angry about it. Yeah, I know they're just fish, but they're completely defenseless. I find it upsetting that somebody just couldn't give enough of a frick about either the fish or my feelings enough to give them a chance to at least survive the 2 weeks I was gone. I'm sorry, fishies, you deserve better. My dad's extramarital affair overseas was exposed and he played the remorseful role, going to family therapy and promising my mom and my brother and I the moon. He convinces us that we are moving to the Philippines for his job. Just so happens that this is where the mistress lives. I didn't know that at the time. He convinces my mom to move there halfway through my senior year. We sell our house, give away family pets, pack up every last thing we own to be sent over to the Philippines in a shipping container. We flew to Seattle with the intent to fly out to Asia the next morning. That night my dad told us all that we weren't going to Asia because he wasn't ready for us to come since he still had his mistress. Then he bounced. He tricked us for all of our stuff, playing a role until he got what he wanted, then dumped us like trash. I cried for 24 hours straight. It was an out-of-body experience and truly what I would describe as a broken heart. My experience with a true sociopath devoid of real emotion. I've never been able to even begin to forgive him. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was on the football team. My best friend's father, who was more present in my life than my real father, passed away. Actually, he was murdered in his sleep. I missed 3 days of school and 3 days of football practice to mourn the loss of this father figure, and the coach kicked me off the team before the last game of the season. This was 9 years ago, and I still hate the man. He was recently arrested for sending nudes to a 15-year-old at the school and I rejoiced. Frick you, Coach Archangelo. A former housemate moved into our spot with his dog. He slowly spent less and less time at the house, shunting all responsibility to me, knowing I would do my best to help. Jake was not my dog. Jake had been raised by this guy since he was a puppy. Jake was brought to this city by his owner from North Carolina. So less and less time he spends at the house, the more this poor dog's training wears off. Flash forward about another 2 months and Jerkwood's then pretentious poet girlfriend wants him to move in with her in a no-pet apartment. Jerkwood calls the Humane Society after making sure it was no kill and says that this dog he raised from a puppy was a stray that had just wandered into the yard and they came and got him one day after he decided to leave him at the house. The worst part is that he was such a spineless piece of crap that he had someone else be at the house when they came for Jake. I don't know what happened to Jake the dog, but I hope he's in a junkyard, as happy as can be, chewing on tires and ripping bumpers off old Honda Accords. I hear a lot of people gripe about how hard it can be to adopt dogs from shelters, and don't get me wrong, it can be difficult, but this piece of crap is the reason why shelters are skittish about adopting out dogs. One of my ex-partners, they kept threatening suicide and self-harm if I tried to break up the relationship. It's been 3 years since I dated that butthole, but I can't help but wonder why they kept doing that. All I know is that they weren't controlling during any part of the relationship, except for when I tried to leave due to their mental instability, as it was affecting my mental health as well. And two mentally ill people being toxic to each other makes a relationship worse. The driver of a truck that came speeding through our residential neighborhood and killed my neighbor's beautiful collie. The guy just sped off, leaving the dead dog lying in the road. I was only a kid who happened to be standing nearby, a witness to this driver's callous, heartless behavior. Even now, as an adult, I'll never forgive him. My mother, she was abusive from as early on as I could remember, up until I cut off contact with her. People say as you get older you understand your parents more. The older I get, the more I hate her because the more things I realize were completely not okay. I would like to just completely forget about her, but brains don't work that way. There is no excuse for child abuse, ever. I don't believe we should try to control people having kids because historically that's just been used to persecute minorities, but I do believe some parents should be beaten to death and left in a ditch. How I treated a less fortunate young man in high school because I was a bully and I'm assuming I just hated myself and took it out on him. He only had like 3 shirts and I'm not even sure his family had running water, so I bought him Axe body spray and deodorant as a joke and he thought I was being nice, so he gave me a hug. There was so much more. I called him names and just treated him terribly and I'll never forgive myself for that. When I called my, admittedly narcissistic, mother because I had been notified that I was going to be called to testify against my sexual abuser in federal court, the very first thing she said was, "Wow, do you think they'll want me to testify too?" I always kind of was aware that she was a selfish butthole, but that moment really drove home how incapable she is of ever thinking about anyone other than herself. Not sure if I can ever forgive, but right now it sure feels like I can't. Wife cheated on me with one of my best friends. Found pics and messages on her phone one night. We are getting divorced. She even had the audacity to say I don't understand why I can't be with him, and you and me still be friends. I wake up every morning and go to bed every night seeing those pics and the words I read. She has done other things as well, but this one is the one I don't know if I can ever forgive. We have a son together, so I do what's best for him, but beyond that, as for my friend, no, I will never forgive him ever. About 10 years ago I bought my first condo. I was living in a small apartment and I planned to get rid of a lot of my old furniture, so there really wasn't a lot of big items to move. The move itself was only a few miles away, so I was doing it bit by bit in my car. A friend of mine offered to help me move all of my final items because he had a pickup truck. We talked about it a number of times. 2 days before the move, he vanishes. Texts, voicemails, emails unanswered. I had to scramble last minute and somehow was able to rent a small U-Haul the day before, and I had to recruit my then 60-year-old father to help me because no one else was available last minute. 6 months later this friend texts me out of the blue like, "Hey man, what's up, long time no see. Frick you. At least friend didn't pick up your stuff and then vanish." When I was 13 or 14, my mom left to go on a business trip, leaving me and my 10-year-old brother with our alcoholic stepdad for a week. After this business trip, my mom returns to break it off with my stepdad and move us to a different town. Little did I know we would be moving in with my mom's affair. That business trip turned out to be a splendid holiday with her lover. To this day I feel my mother's abandonment. To think she left her children with an abusive alcoholic to have a getaway trip with her lover. My mom has always chosen men over her children. Always. I've come to expect it, but I can't forgive her for leaving us like that. I spent a week in heck tiptoeing around my stepdad, wanting nothing more than the familiar comfort of my mom while she was on some beach drinking a cocktail with an umbrella in it. My mom is exactly the same. All of her kids are grown now, so she neglected the job she lost yesterday for her new beau. That's not even mentioning the time she attempted suicide after the most recent stepdad left when I was in high school and my siblings were still in elementary. My boyfriend's sisters actively tried to convince him to leave me because of my race for the first 4-5 years of our relationship. It's 11 years together and married now, and they act friendly, but I'm always secretly bitter. My sister. She's always been a liar and a narcissist, but I'll never forgive what happened when my dad died. As I said, she's always been shady, but during his illness she seemed to be making an effort to be helpful and I thought things had changed. Oh no. She stole his debit card and cleaned out his bank account while he was in a coma in hospice. She stole his last social security check, cashed it and spent every dime on herself. Joke was on her. SS pulled the check back and her account was overdrawn. The final straw was telling my dad that his workplace needed him to sign some papers. So he did. Those papers were him signing over his pension to her instead of everything being split between his kids. I knew nothing until after the funeral, but when I found out, I lost it. Threatened to call the police and have her jailed. The bank theft alone would have led to many years in prison. After much ado, she paid it back and we worked out an agreement with the pension where everyone was paid correctly. I'll never forgive. It's been 10 years and she's had many unanticipated consequences for her actions and she deserves every one. What kind of person robs their dying father? That's a sociopath. My dad. For consistently being a narcissistic butthole. For slapping my sister across the face years ago. For defending my mom. For prioritizing work over family always. For threatening to leave our family on my 18th birthday. For threatening to throw me out on my butt on my younger sister's birthday. For telling him to not be mean to waitresses at a restaurant. The list goes on. The bastard who took my innocence at age 6 and gave me PTSD, nightmares, trust issues and depression. A family member forgave him and was showing off pictures of them hanging out one Christmas. Frick that guy too. I won't tolerate people who think rape is okay and something to get over. I agree with you. My mom didn't even take my molestation seriously. She found out like 3 years after it happened and her excuse for not getting me therapy was that I didn't seem any different, hence why we don't have a good relationship to this day. Bullying. I was bullied for all of my school life by multiple people and it's left me scarred. People have come to me years later and tried to apologize, which I respect, but won't forgive. Bullies are the kind of people who usually think they're having fun in a group singling someone out, but it leaves a lasting impact on that person's life. My brother tried to sexually assault me. He's done a lot of horrid crap before, but that's just one thing even I won't be able to forgive him for. When I was in kindergarten I drew a picture with smiley faces all around the border. It took me like 20 minutes to do each of the tiny faces. Little did I know the fat butthole Tyler was jealous of my rad art skills, so he held me down and drew frowns over all the smiles. I haven't spoken to him to this day. Frick Tyler. Nobody liked him anyway. My ex's parents. They were a low-income family and none of them had ever been to college. My GF worked all through high school, paid her own bills, found her own motivation to go to college, did go to college and graduated and worked the whole time, all while her parents complained and gave her crap and never helped her out financially while spending frivolously on themselves and never encouraging or congratulating her. She was so sweet and kind too. Heartless swine. I tried to take my own life in high school. After my first therapy session, the first and only thing my dad said to me about it was, "You didn't tell them I touched you or anything, did you?" If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.